Welcome back, everybody. We are here for another Wellbeing Wednesday. So, if you have not joined us before, this is the monthly segment that shows childcare providers and caregivers like yourself simple ways to support your own well-being, because taking care of ourselves is, in fact, also taking care of others. So, whether you're an early childhood educator, a director, parent, or someone who just feels like a parent some days, because we've all been there, you're sure to pick up tidbits of actionable advice about how to support your overall well-being and get back to feeling like yourself. I'm your host, Susanna Creed, with Be Well Care Well Arkansas, a program that's all about supporting the well-being of childcare providers and is a part of the larger Be Well Care Well organization and model as well. So because it is the second day, I know dates, y'all. Because it is the second day of August, it is officially back to school month. So it is super great. This is a wonderful time full of excitement, new beginnings, all sorts of things. However, with all of that new excitement, oftentimes can come some stress, right? And some challenges. And it's important to be aware of these effects on us. So, whether it's you're sending your child off to school for the very first time, or whether you're a teacher who's welcoming a full class of pre-K students. Even if it's exciting, it can also be challenging. And so with this month, we really wanted to focus on kind of building our awareness of our own stress. How do we know when we're stressed? What does that look like? And also talk about some quick tips and ways that we can take those elevated stress levels down just a peg so that we're able to kind of keep our cool and continue on our day and enjoy the exciting moments. So today we have Tia Prostko. I'm really excited to have her with us. She is a fellow Be Well Care Well coach. So she is actually coming to us from South Carolina. She has a bachelor's degree in physical education and a master's in health and physical activity. And she's also worked as a health educator for ABC Quality in her state. So we are super excited to have her here for our discussion around stress. Also, if y'all have been here before, please post any aha moments, your comments, your questions. Please post any of those in the comments as we go, and I'll be kind of checking as we go. And if you have a question, we might be able to discuss it live here. So Tia, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really excited to have you.
Thank you, Susanna. Wonderful. I'm so excited to be here.
All right, well, let's dive into it. So I think that there were a couple of areas we wanted to talk through, and maybe we can start with kind of that stress awareness piece. And so I'm kind of curious what your take is on, either for your personal life or in the work that you do with Be Well Care Well, what helps kind of build your awareness of when you're stressed and what that stress can look like. So I'd love to just kind of start the conversation there.
Yeah, actually, for me I'll talk a little bit about both. For me personally, I honestly, and just like everybody else, I don't always realize I'm stressed until something happens.
Preach it.
An extreme example is that I actually had shingles this year at 38 years old.
Right.
It was a mild case, but I do remember, even the few days before the shingles kind of, rash showing up on my skin, feeling kind of off and having a few more physical, like odd symptoms than I normally would have. And so unfortunately, I didn't realize at the time that I was more stressed than normal. Thankfully, as I said, I had a mild case. And so I was able to, continue on with many of my daily activities while also being able to reflect like, oh, this almost always happens because a body is under stress. And so what has been going on because of my life lately that has caused this? And so, as I said, I was like smacked in the face with it a little bit. But a less extreme example is that, and along those same lines, I have, and maybe because of my education, for example, or my interest in physical activity and physical education, I am a physical person. So I talk with my hands and I feel things in my body a lot. And so, for example, yesterday I ate quite a bit differently than I often do. And I felt that this morning physically. And so for me, over the years, I have realized that my body is what is telling me I'm under stress. And so when I can listen to that, when I am paying attention to how I feel physically, whether it be tired or even a little bit of inflammation, like I felt this morning, or even kind of like hunger, but not hunger. It's kind of this just irritated feeling physically.
Hmm. Yeah.
I realize that I'm under stress. So that is not how everybody feels it, but I encourage people, actually, people that I work with in Be Well, Care Well, to think about that and think about, like, over time, especially, maybe what things have come up for them in their bodies that has occurred after they've done things a little differently, or been under a lot of stress. So that's
Yeah.
something for me that I like to kind of talk about with people, because it's definitely a human thing.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't know about you. So, both for everybody watching, both Tia and I are yoga teachers. So, the physical aspect, and I also got a degree in exercise science, which had a physical education component. So, we're speaking a lot of the same language. So, this may or may not resonate with everybody, but I think it provides a different perspective, because I know for myself, um, it's very hard. Like, I like things that are tangible, going back to the body, right? And my thoughts a lot of times don't feel tangible. And so when I'm stressed, or when I'm trying to see what I'm stressed about and I go into my mind, a lot of people that works. They can change their thoughts and then change their actions. That has just not ever worked for me. And I didn't really hear a lot of people talking about it. It was always like, no, you have to start with the mind. And I'm like, whenever I go into my mind, I can't grasp it. And actually, even as we're talking here, it's a good reminder to me to, okay, if my mind feels like it sucks me in and now I'm in this like tornado basically in my head of all the thoughts, it's going to be really hard to tease things out. But maybe I can go to something that's tangible in my body. And so, if you haven't heard of this, those who are watching, there's something called a body scan. It's a type of meditation, mindfulness, awareness building technique. And it's easier sometimes than going into our minds if you're anything like me. And again, it doesn't work for everybody. But for instance, a really easy way, and you don't have to wait till you're stressed. You can do it anytime to start to build awareness of your body. So I might, start now and say, okay, let me kind of focus my attention at the top of my head. Okay, let me bring my attention down to behind my eyes, the back of my head, my ears, my jaw, down to my neck. And just as I'm doing that, noticing the sensations. Now, the hard part is not judging it. And that comes with time and with practice. Meditation, mindfulness, it's all called a practice, because we never arrive. We're never perfect at it. We're always practicing. But if I can notice as I'm going, oh, you know what? I have a lot of tension in my jaw. Okay. And then I'm going down to my neck. Oh, my shoulders are raised. Okay. And then I go down to my stomach and I'm like, oh, my stomach is in knots. Okay. And like becoming aware of it. And it's, again, I'm speaking to those who maybe need something tangible. It's like, okay, it's a step by step. You start at the head, go to the feet, just notice what you notice. And it's focusing on my body instead of my thoughts. And that can sometimes help. And honestly, sometimes just building, like going through that and noticing, like I noticed even as I did it now, my stomach has been in a bit of knots today. And I go into my stomach and I'm like, okay, there's some knots there. And as soon as I'm moving on, honestly, y'all, I feel it open a little, because sometimes those parts of us just want to be seen. Just like think about the kids we work with, like, or that you all work with. Half the time, they just want somebody to see them, to hear them, to hold them. They don't need you to solve their problems. The problem's going to be solved just by saying, I see you. Let them cry. And then when they cry, they're like, okay, I'm good now. So think about the body that way too. And it's just something I'm very passionate about, because so many people have been like, change your thoughts, change your mind, change your life. And I'm like, I can't. But when they remind me to come back to the body, like you just did, Tia, it's like, oh, that is tangible. And it's also another way to access those thoughts and change and build that awareness. So, anyways, I went on way too long. That just was a huge thing. I didn't realize I was going to get so
No, that's
passionate about it.
okay.
But
And as we're talking, Suzanne, I just want to say
mhm.
that's a great practice. My mom actually, when I was little, did a guided body scan for me when I was little bitty and couldn't fall asleep. And I remember it very vividly, starting at my toes. But speaking of my toes, I actually have two things that I have often done that I have picked up over the years that are kind of momentary, just kind of connecting me back to my body and the physical parts of me that that might need a little bit of attention, and they just take a second. One is curling your toes and then trying to spread them out. So you can even do that in your shoes, and it's just a
I'm doing
weird,
that right now.
yeah, it's like you don't really curl your toes that much on
Especially
purpose.
as adults. We're
Yeah.
like, we don't need those toes. It's fine.
But they're really important, and your feet actually, I mean, our feet are these amazing things that carry us around all day while we're walking around, and we don't give them as much attention as they deserve. And so even just curling our toes and then spreading them out as much as possible a couple times is a really great option. And then the other thing is a little strange, but I'll show it to you. It's and this helps me relax my jaw, which is taking my tongue and just running my tongue along all of my top teeth and all of my bottom teeth in one direction and then going the other way. So I'll just do it right now.
Yeah.
And it looks really
yeah,
silly,
interesting.
but it's a very different sensation, and you can't clench your jaw while you're doing it. And so if you feel like you are clenching your jaw at any point, maybe not trying to talk back to your 11-year-old, like I not to talk back to my 11-year-old when she's grouchy or any number of things are happening. I've done that a number of times, and it really just helps me kind of come back to like the space without a clenched jaw. So those are two super quick.
Yeah. I love those. I did both of them while we were here. And I mean, I clench my jaw so much, especially when I sleep even. And I mean, I can't really do much about that. Can't tell my unconscious self to be like, relax. But, you know, I can do other things, but especially the clenched jaw. And I even thought like, imagine if I mean, I know so many of the teachers that I've worked with, they, you know, will get really frustrated, understandably. We're dealing with a lot. 0 to 5-year-olds, are you kidding? Like, you're responsible for everything and they're feeling all the things. It's a heavy job. And so we get frustrated sometimes. But when you did that, it made me think of like that could be a really cool thing to do in the classroom or with a child. So if you maybe have a child who's a baby and has been frustrating, you know, well, they just see your face, but what they're seeing is like they're seeing something funny. It's engaging to them, right? But for you as the caregiver, you're like, okay, this is me kind of refocusing and taking care of myself with, you know, while I'm dealing with the baby who in this moment is frustrating me. And that's normal to have that happen. And then thinking about even like 4-year-olds or 3-year-olds, you know, that could be something you do with them. Say, you know what, it sounds like we're really frustrated right now. Let's try this. Let's see how far out we can push our tongue while keeping it on our teeth.
Yeah.
And the child might not need it, but maybe I need it as the teacher and say, all right, class, we're going to do this. I want to see how, and you're doing it to recenter yourself while also giving them a tool. And it's kind of funny. So, I mean, that just seems like a great way to, you know, and in Be Well Care Well, we talk a lot about incorporating mindfulness and brain breaks and stress relief into the workday. Boom, right there. And you can teach the toe curling one to the kids as well. You can do it yourself as the adult. So it's things that don't require you to say, all right, I have to step away from the kids and I have to get a floater and I have to get coverage for ratios to get out and breathe. It's like, no, I can do this with them and I can calm myself down, but I'm also educating them. 2 for 1, like we love those and Be Well Care Well, like let's get 2 for 1, 3 for 1, let's go. So I love those so much. And yeah, I think so much of the time with, especially with stress, if we're in chronic stress or we're not used to we get into the cycle, right? Where like the thoughts just kind of keep going and keep going and keep going. And so sometimes to break that so we can actually look at what's really going on, we need to do something different, something to not quite shock the body, but catch its attention. So if you're going over here and then you do that tongue thing, you're like, oh, that's different. And boop. And it's like, oh, I have to focus on that because I'm not used to that sensation. And it takes us out of that negative cycle that we can find ourselves in. So I think that those are some really great options. I'm going to check the comments real quick. Okay, we got some people who are loving those. Hey, Nicole, we're so happy to have you here. And again, for anybody who is on the live with us, please feel free to comment any of the techniques that you like to use to either build or manage your stress. If you have questions, or if you've had like, hey, I've wanted to work on this and I'm just not sure, feel free to ask that. And if we don't know the answer, we can probably look for the answer and get back to you and share that with you. So please feel free to ask as we go. But I also think, Tia, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that you had a couple of other things that you were going to talk about as well. Some other techniques.
Okay. Yeah. Well, yeah, we were talking a little earlier about how, at least for me, and I think for a lot of people, especially in such a busy world that is globally interconnected, it can feel in some ways like we are in, a small piece of the pie. We're this tiny speck, which actually, depending on the day or depending on the situation, isn't a bad thing. But in other ways, it feels like it's impossible to make any changes in the way that we as caregivers and folks who are, supporting caregivers want to do good things. We want to make a good a change for good. And so sometimes it feels like we're too small or insignificant to do that. Although I will argue that teachers and other early childhood professionals are doing that, because exponentially through their classroom work, they are changing, the lives of, 5 or so up to 20 children in their classrooms. So that should have an impact for the long term. But I have taken quite a bit of time over the last 4 or 5 years to study myself and how I feel about that idea, kind of feeling too small to do much in certain areas. And I decided that I can do things that are big enough for my life, and I've heard a little bit about in certain instances about how being good enough is good. There is something to be said.
Oh, that perfectionism.
Or yes,
like if it's not everything, it's nothing. And it's like good enough is still great.
Exactly. So many things in life are gray, and that's a good thing. But there are 2 areas that I really learned are really wonderful for me to focus on in that way. And so taking this very large picture problem maybe and minimizing it to make it a big impact in my life. And one of those is the fact that the environment is struggling a little bit under the weight of our human existence. And so I should say not struggling a little bit, but we're not going to go there. There are a lot of things that have changed over the last century when it comes to the environment. And so I can't change that, but I can change certain things about my life so that I feel good about, what I'm doing. And those things are that I recycle as much as I possibly can. And I love living in a county, for example, that still recycles glass. Oh, sorry, my cat is...
That's okay. We're talking about stressors and life happens. We welcome
you all saw her whiskers
here.
You saw her whiskers.
You were talking about nature. We needed a little nature in it. So, we got that.
She's like, yes, please make sure the planet is good. We're not just humans, but the feline population as well.
Love it. Advocating for herself.
Exactly. But as I was saying, I live in the county next door to us stopped recycling glass a while ago, and it actually became kind of a big thing in the local news. And And so we actually recycle glass in the county I live in. And so in addition to being kind of excited about that, I try to buy as much glass as possible as opposed to plastic, because the county I live in is making the effort to recycle it. And so I am, and it's reusable for forever. So even if I
Mhm.
decide to reuse it instead of recycling it, I often can do that. And the other thing is that actually I do two other things. One is that I compost as much as possible. So
Mhm.
I don't use that much of it in my garden, but the weeds around my compost pile are thrilled, and we just drop
There
them
you
down.
go. You give it back to the earth.
And then there is an organization that I would like to find out more about in detail, but I love that they exist and I use their
Mhm.
resources, which is the Environmental Working Group. And it has an app.
Okay.
It is a non-governmental agency that provides information, consumer information about, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of products that people use. And they rate those products based on the safety of the ingredients for both
Hmm.
humans and the planet. And so their ratings are not opinion based. Their ratings are based
Mhm.
on how much research has been done about the ingredients in a product. And so, and then they kind of compile the rate, or, the safety of all the ingredients into a number from like 1 to 10, 10 being the
Mhm.
most harmful, and or including the most harmful ingredients. And so I've changed like my hair products, my skin products, my sunscreen,
Mhm.
my cleaning products. I'm working towards changing based on that and their recommendations. And so for me, those are the things that I can do in my life, actionable items that will kind of hopefully chip away at the larger problem that I can't do quite as much about. So
Yeah. I think those are some really good points, because a lot of us, the world affects us, right? And so you've set my mind on fire, and I'm going to try to like hone in on a couple of those things. But, one of the things that you talked about was kind of media consumption and kind of your choices around that. So one of the things that's really important too is, you know, sometimes it's like, okay, we need to not, I like, either we're at a stage in our life, in a season of our life, or we're just the people where we're like, all right, I cannot engage in that. Other times it's, okay, am I balancing that? So if I'm constantly scrolling and seeing a lot of negative social media, am I also balancing that with connecting to maybe some more friends on Facebook or on Snapchat or texting my friends? So kind of balancing that media, and kind of shameless plug, but we do have a training often on Curricular Concepts webpage, that's free for Arkansas educators, and I believe you get PDR credit. I have to check if we have it coming up, but be on the lookout for it's like healthy media, um, for children. So it's a great thing kind of going in this, for the educators, for us to be aware of as adults, because we might learn some things that we can apply ourselves, but also how to talk about something like that and how to approach that with either our children or the children that we serve. So kind of balancing that media consumption and looking at that for each of ourselves. And then you also talked about feeling kind of I'm a very sensitive person as well. So like the things in the world can be, even if I don't consciously know that they're affecting me, they can affect me. And, you know, one of the really cool techniques was that you talked about was, what can I control?
mhm.
It's like I might not be able to magically make the planet better, but there are some things I can do in my life. And those are things that I can do. And those are things that I have access to resources to do and I want to do. And so, even with like our Be Well, Care Well work, I know that you probably are aware of it with wellness of the earth, of anything. It's so many small steps and it's a process. And so, a lot of times, we're in a culture now where we want results fast, and that's a lot of times not how it happens. It might seem small, but it's going to take a while for us to look back and realize, oh, wait, look at all that I've done. And so focusing on things you can control and also focusing on those little wins, and that's where it sounds cheesy, but a gratitude list, that's an act. I'm a big tangible person. That's a tangible thing I can do. I can write down a gratitude list, and it might take several weeks to several months, but I'm probably going to look up one time and say, oh, you know what? My perspective has changed just a little bit. And so really honing in and focusing on those. Also, you probably, with Be Well, Care Well, at least some of our sites in Arkansas have actually expressed interest in recycling and looking into options. So if anybody's watching this now or the replay and you are like, oh, I never even thought about composting, but I can't do that. I don't know how to start that. I don't want it to smell, all these things. Please reach out to your well-being coach, because it's our job to help research and help you find those resources, because there are so many out there. There are so many resources of how to go about recycling. Like you mentioned, the environmental work group. I'm pretty sure at least one of our coaches already uses that, if not most of them. I'm just the one behind the time, so I need to get on it. But focusing on the small wins, focusing on what we can control, and taking those actions, and kind of balancing that healthy media are all really good ways. And then what we've also talked about of little ways to get back into our body, to build our awareness, and little ways that we can kind of redirect our focus to our body's experience so that we can kind of get out of, or at least distance ourselves a bit from, the cycle of stress. And Tia, you'll love this. One of the comments she was saying is so great. I'm still relaxing my toes. And she also said, my sister and I make meals for our community for free, and that helps her. And she also loves recycling. So yeah, those things boost our wellness, because when we give back to the community, we feel a part of, which goes into our social well-being. And even recycling, giving back to the earth, it can kind of help us feel connected in some way. But I can't believe we're actually pretty much out of time. These times always go so fast, but I want to check, Tia, is there any last things that you want to make sure you share before we hop off for today?
Well, I'll take just a moment.
Yeah.
One thing, and this is related to a couple of things that you said, and it actually is the question that I ask myself over and over. When I feel kind of too small to do much, and even out of control of others, even like in my daily life, and maybe their actions that I wouldn't necessarily choose for myself. And most of us went to school and heard the line, or a version of the line, stay on your own paper, or keep your eyes on your own paper. And so something I heard a number of years ago related to that, and this idea of being able to control myself, is that asking myself, is this on my paper? And then if I can honestly say yes, then I can ask myself a second question, but is it on my paper right now? And so kind of that comes back to keeping me in the present moment and what I can control in that moment. And so if the answers to those two questions are yes, then choosing to do something about it, it is appropriate. But if not, then kind of reflecting on, as I said before, actions that I can take for myself, for the things that are on my paper. So
I love that. And that's, again, kind of a great awareness building, practice, and also a great kind of stress management practice, because if we realize we put all these things on our paper, but are they really on our paper? And then, also, does it have to be done today? Like, it can still be on there, but like maybe you have like a separate paper of like someday, and each day you can kind of be like, is this the day? And if it's like, no, all right, that's fine. I have it there. So I love all these. And I hope that y'all who are joining us for the live got some really great tidbits out of this. I know I personally did. I'm going to remember to be back in my body. So thank you, Tia. That's going to help me a lot. And for those of you who are watching the replay, please feel free to comment any techniques that you have that have worked for you, any other questions, things like that. But we'll get to rounding out. Tia, I want to thank you again so much for joining us. It was a pleasure to have a fellow Be Well, Care Well coach from South Carolina on with us, and I'm so glad it was you. So thank you. And for those of you who are watching, please make sure to follow Curricula Concepts on Facebook and Instagram so you don't miss a thing. We also have Be Well, Care Well, which bewellcarewell.com, I believe, is the kind of overarching across the states. And we also have it on Instagram and Facebook over there. So check all of those out. If you like today's show, please feel free to share it with your friends, family, and coworkers. And if you are a child care provider in Arkansas and you want to learn more about enrolling in Be Well Care Well, you can also check out the link that I'll post in the comment down below. So I think that is a wrap for us today. This has been another Wellbeing Wednesday. I'm your host, Susanna Creed, wishing you all well. Bye, everyone.